there was a proposal within, and George, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, but there was a proposal within a curriculum of New Zealand for schools to include mātauranga Māori as a part of a science curriculum. There were 7 academics who are now known as the Listener 7 or something like that, who wrote a letter to the listener and all signed it. And I just want to read one paragraph from it, and then I'll throw to you, George. They talked about their opposition to mātauranga Māori being included in this for this reason. They say it includes the following description as part of the new course. So this is a quote from the new NCEA document. That
a working document, I should say.
Working document, thank you. But this was one of the proposed aspects to include mātauranga Māori in there as well. They say of Western science, that's how they refer to it, that, quote, it promotes discussion. Oh, sorry, this is of mātauranga Māori. This is what they say. They say, quote, it promotes discussion and analysis of the ways in which science has been used to support the dominance of Eurocentric views, among which is used as a rationale for colonization of Māori and the suppression of Māori knowledge, and the notion that science is a Western European invention. Scroll it down a little bit. Western European invention, and itself evidence of European dominance over Māori and other indigenous peoples. So that was, I guess, a draft is what you're saying, a working document to be included in a science curriculum as to why mātauranga Māori was going to be included. These 7 academics and scientists said basically science has no cultural aspect. And in the letter they talk about, ancient Islam, and they talked about India, and they talked about the various parts of the world that have added to the science, I was going to say rhetoric, but knowledge we have now. And it doesn't, in its purest sense, I guess they're saying, it's neither white nor brown or whatever. And so they showed an opposition to, I guess, the wording of that, talking about how science was used as a rationale for colonization. Is that a fair summation as you got it, George?
Yeah, I mean, the wording was from just a very non-consequential internal working document about, they incorrectly say that it is going to be part of a new NCA course. But nonetheless, the central idea behind it is really that a science course should also involve the history of science and the philosophy of science, right, rather than science itself. And I guess that's the issue I would have with the so-called Listener 7, is that they seem, they're defending science, and I'm not too sure from discussion about the historical context of science as a tool of colonization, or a conversation around what Māori knowledge brings to the science curriculum or whatever, right? And, again, based on a recommendation that wasn't even really part of an NCA course to begin with. I just feel like it's sort of it's sort of this cultural, warfare or moral panic over something that isn't even threatening their, whatever they call their science, right? Isn't even threatening their discipline of science. In other words, it's a sort of made up moral panic. And there's all these other layers to the story that involve Siouxsie Wiles as well that we can
which we'll get into.
Well.
I think it's also interesting to put in there as well from that same letter. They do talk about sort of, we call it Māori knowledge. They do say Indigenous knowledge is critical for the preservation and perpetuation of culture and local practices, and plays key roles in management and policy. However, in the discovery of empirical universal truth, it falls far short of what we can define as science itself. I mean, I'm not to defend what they're saying, but it sounds like they're being purists, and they say if you can't test it and repeat that test and get the same results, it's not science. It's repeatable, it's evidence-based. And what you're saying, George, and I think perhaps what Siouxsie was saying is there is also a story to be told around science. And part of that is part of the New Zealand story around it. I read somewhere else that they were talking about myths and legends, how myths and legends don't have any part to play in a science curriculum. I haven't seen evidence whether there were going to be things about taniwha, my word, or something included in it or not. But it sounds like there's a group of people, and there were Māori amongst the people of that listener 7. It wasn't a bunch of redneck, and they're academics, and let's be honest, academics, George, normally do swing pretty heavily left as well. So it's not necessarily your kind of, News Talk ZB overnight listeners who are writing that letter. It is academics, and it does involve some Māori on there as well. And I wonder if it's one of those conversations going past each other where some purists are saying this is what science is, and other people are saying, well, but there's a story behind science, and we want to tell the story. Chewy, you should jump in because we've taken all the...
Look, I am 100% a layperson that studied broadcasting, and that was about as sciencey as I ever got. But look, my understanding of I guess scientific process has come up with an idea, test it, see if it works, and it's repeatable, and that's basically, you boil everything down to that. And I think what this is kind of, New Zealand traditionally has brought a lot of its a European focus to everything that it's done, and of course Europeans colonized New Zealand, and we brought our superior ways of thinking and doing things, and these people, we've rescued them and we've improved their lives, and there's nothing of value of their culture that we should really keep, and that has been the way of New Zealand for a long time, and now we're coming to a point where some people are going, well, hang on, there's an enormous amount of knowledge that has come from Māori and Pacific people, and they've done it in a different way from everybody else. You can't tell me a culture can navigate the largest ocean on earth just from luck. It's science and it's knowledge, and it's had a way of being passed down. And I think the Eurocentric point of view has been very, very quick to dismiss that as luck or superstition. I mean, you look at stuff in the Bible that has definitely a scientific root. The way that we're going to communicate this out to people is in the way of a myth or a fable or a story,
right?
But the key thing is, don't do this thing, you'll die.
You're talking about, for example, when it said avoid some of these foods, for example, and that's because some of those foods were, if they weren't cooked properly, they could cause massive amounts of issues for you as a human being, and maybe it was told
or hygiene stuff. Even it's a way of passing down knowledge, and I think we keep on seeing things. I remember seeing a story about some archaeologists down south from here, down in the Catlins, finding food storage pits and going, "Oh, this is amazing!" Like, we'd never had any concept that Māori were cultivating this far south, and local Māori were going, "Yeah, we knew that we did because we have these stories." Māori culture is a word of mouth culture. Their stories are retained.
I guess, as with everything, the devil's in the detail, isn't it? Because we don't actually know what the end item would have been, so we can't really comment. If they were, I'm being silly on purpose, but if they were talking about the evidence for taniwha, we'd all go, "Don't be fucking stupid. That's not supposed to be in a science thing." But if they were talking about, stories behind why they do that, because it's got to do with the river and how it moves and that kind of stuff, then that's a way of looking at it. I was just thinking, even within the European culture, we all know the story, quote unquote, around Alexander Fleming leaving out the piece of bread and getting molding and him discovering penicillin. There's a story behind that about the penicillin and the bread, and which is not the science part of it, but it's the story. So it's interesting, George, you and I talked about this before the show, and I wasn't quite clear, but I'm sort of clearer now in my head after we've talked. We do need to move on to the second part of this, though, as well, which is actually what happened with the Media Council. So Siouxsie Wiles wrote a piece in stuff.co.nz, and the piece was titled, in fact, I'll bring up the piece because it's still on stuff.co.nz, albeit redacted based on the complaint. It was entitled "Academics Use Your Mana to Aid Colleagues and Not Fight Them." There was a line in the story, and it was talking about, supporting Māori and supporting, having more representation. And there was a line in it that was taken out, and the line was, as a part of the sentences, even though it's been taken out, it's still there as an addendum. Astonishingly now, well, actually, we've missed a step, haven't we, George? We probably need to explain that there was a response by some that caused some of the listener 7 to want to take this a bit further, which then responded in the university, sending out lawyers' letters to some staff as a part of a process they had to follow. Yeah. So they had to follow the process of making contact with some people through lawyers, whether that's policy or law, I'm not sure, but that's the way the Auckland University does it. And from those letters going out, this line was included in Siouxsie's original article, which is then the case before the Media Council. I think that's clear. This line has now been taken out. Siouxsie said, astonishingly, some are the listener 7, are now intimidating junior colleagues with lawyers' letters. Now, staff has taken that out and has actually stated clearly these, quote, lawyers' letters were sent by the University of Auckland following a Privacy Act request made by 2 of the listener 7 letter writers. So the university sent them, not the academics. The way it's been written, I think it's fair to say many would think the way Siouxsie wrote it was that the academics were sending the lawyers' letters. Whereas the academics applied to the university followed their practice, and part of their practice included notifying these people through lawyers. That's pretty clear, yeah, George?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. We've got to talk it out. We've got to get it around. Now, that was then, there was a Media Council complaint made, and yesterday the findings were released that the media complaint was upheld. The Media Council has found the statement, astonishingly, some are now intimidating junior colleagues with lawyers' letters, was inaccurate and required immediate and clear correction. The Media Council ruling can be seen if you want it. Because part of the other complaint was the Media Council said that this article went up December 20th and it wasn't corrected until December 31st. So there's also a period of time that stuff left that what the Media Council is calling an incorrect statement up and didn't remove it quickly enough. So little bit sort of litigious, and round we go. I contacted Siouxsie and I asked Siouxsie if she was interested in coming on and talking about this today, and she said no, but she gave me a statement. So I asked her if she wanted to come on, and I think it's important for us to share Siouxsie's statement, and I don't know if anywhere else has got a statement from Siouxsie about the decision. Siouxsie says this: I'm disappointed with the ruling, as we sent the Media Council 2 of the letters sent by the professor's lawyers to the uni demanding the junior colleagues' emails. So the statement released about the case is misleading, as it is written to imply the only lawyer involved was the university's, which is simply not true. Even in this statement, though, from Siouxsie, it says that the council too had letters sent to the university, because it says by the professor's lawyers to the university, and then the university sent lawyers' letters to the junior colleagues. So I don't know. Even according to this up in here, it's the academics, the listener 7, the people who followed this up. It says clearly here they didn't send lawyers' letters to the junior colleagues. They sent them to the university. And again, I wonder if it's just a bit they're all missing each other and seeing what's going on. I've got more information from Siouxsie as well, who I was messaging this morning, but you guys are welcome to jump in on this and share any thoughts you've got first.
It sounds like a mess. A big old mess. Just looking at some of the comments in the chat, I kind of agree with this, that this sort of thing, when it pops up, can really be like a rallying cry to some really nasty people. Again, I think George, you mentioned culture war.
That comment there?
Yeah, critical race theory. And it was seen here that's just gone bananas in the US. And I think there is the potential for a very similar thing to happen here. You know, European culture is being pushed out by Māori nonsense.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what we're seeing here with the media council rulings and that sort of thing, is that these become personal vendettas and sort of almost wars between Twitter personalities or column writers for the platform, getting their daily kind of fix of, writing about, a pink lady woman who, pink-haired woman.
First of all, it's a
with
woman,
opinions.
so I'm angry. Second of all, pink hair. Ah!
I mean, that's unfair on my part. I'm sort of caricaturing this whole thing, but it feels like there was these small technicalities with how the university dealt with things that were sort of blown out of proportion, and then on Siouxsie's part, to then go beyond the debate at hand about science classes and Māori knowledge, or science also including the historical context of science and that sort of thing, go beyond that and sort of make these accusations of intimidation and go beyond that debate, also doesn't help the situation, right? It means we get into these complicated roundabout things with the media council and this sort of thing. But you're right, the original point, the critical race theory stuff that was just totally cooked up by conservative think tanks in America to get voters afraid, basically get them scared of the lefties under the bed. It is a similar sort of thing going on here.
And look, to echo this idea of who is blowing this up, if you actually search this now, what you'll find is friend of the show, David Farrar, is on Kiwi Blog, which is typically a conservative right-wing thing. It's on whatever that's BFD or whatever it is, which I think is Cameron Slater's new one. I found it through The Platform, which is Sean Plunkett's one, who's even though he claims to not have any bias in his new idea, a right-wing. So the people who are writing opinion pieces on it all seem to be on the right and doing that. Let me just read as well. I won't read the whole thing, but I after that quote that I put up came through from Siouxsie and I asked her permission to use it and she said yes. I then rewrote her and I said, well, one more question. If that's the case, as you've just said, why did the media council rule against you? Like what if you're right now in your response now, why have you had the ruling against you? And I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's quite long, but and also there's probably some things in here that if the media council is going to say boo to that, they might say boo to some of these if I was to read them out. But she does say, no idea. This is the point. Though they, media council, all clearly decided there was just one interpretation of the sentence in question. And I have to say, with the greatest of respect to Siouxsie, I think there probably is just one interpretation of that sentence. Astonishingly, some are now intimidating junior colleagues with lawyers' letters. I mean, without saying anyone's right or wrong of this, I think it was probably a bit of a poorly written sentence. George, you've watched me, how carefully I am to write, what's going to come up in the show and that to try and be as clear as possible. And when we put something in written word, if it's not 100% clear, if there is any ambiguity, then you lose control of your own narrative. So that's a little part of this as well.
Yeah, because effectively she gave her enemies the opportunity to lodge the media council complaint, right?
Yeah.
And then again, as I said, it becomes not about the debate any longer.